that evening, Will and I went out and sat in the car while they was visiting back and forth. And when we went in the house, Grandma was mad, says, "Where you two been?" And sitting out there in the car. And she just really was mad, though. And Aunt Belle got a chance, and she says, "Just what's the trouble here?" And I says, "Oh, Grandma's so jealous of Will and I says, I've been trying to find a job in town or somewhere. Tried to find a job there at the hotel, but they were kind of closing up for the winter, and just Mrs. Shibley was the only one going to be running it. And she says, "I think you better go home with me." And she had a railroad man's hotel, and it was right close to the depot. And they, so I decided that, well, when she told Grandma about it, she thought she'd take me home with her. And Grandma, she was just all for that, get me away from there, because she still had it in her mind she's going to make a preacher out of Will. And she said she'd done and taken him as far as she could. Now then she wanted him to marry a good Christian girl that would help him in his church work. And so there was no use of me thinking about us ever getting married. And so Grandma, she was just all for that. And we told Will about it. Why, well, maybe that'd be the best. That he didn't have money enough to get married now. He had to do some plowing and get some more money. And so I didn't go with her the day she left, because she was going back into Kansas and pick up things she'd left there with those friends. But I followed her just pretty soon after that. And Will didn't say too much in his letters about being lonesome or wanting me to come back while he was still carrying mail. But when the ground thawed out so that he could plow, why, he moved out to the ranch. And so Grandma and Grandpa Pat always went to bed just with the chickens. They never lit the lamp. They always went to bed, and then Pat would get up way early in the morning and go tend to his mules and harness his mules and come in, get breakfast, and he always got breakfast. And then sit around and wait for it to be daylight so he could leave. And they didn't have a clock. That's the first thing. One time when he was going to town with a load of posts, he asked if there's anything I wanted. I told him I'd give him a list. He says, "No, anything personal that you want." And I says, "Well, I want a Big Ben clock." I miss that clock a-ticking, because we'd always had a clock. But Grandma had a bunch of tacks, and I started to pull those tacks up before I got the clock. And oh no, don't do that. He says, "You can scrub over them," but people come there and she'd ask them what time it was, around 12 o'clock. Why, she'd put she had those tar paper nails and tacks and different things, different tacks drove in there for different times a year. And that was her clock. And boy, I wanted a clock. But she was funny in lots of ways. And I never was used to leaving things on the table after we ate while the table was cleaned off. But all the center things, as she called them, they stayed on the table. And you washed the dishes and you reset the table. and then put the dirty dish towel over the whole thing. And of course they bought the sugar and flour with 100-pound sacks, and that's what they used. Well, sometime along in there, Pat had gone to a sale and bought a sewing machine, an old white. I don't know, probably didn't give over $1 or $2 for it, I don't know. And I didn't know how to sew on the sewing machine, but I'd seen Mama sew so long, and I knew more or less how to do it. So I practiced up on that, and then I hemmed some of those big 100-pound sacks and embroidered around them, and I did a lot of embroidering when I was still at home. I didn't know how to crochet yet. And anyway, when I got the dishes done, I could put the plates back on the table, but I had a nice cloth to put over the top. And but I went back to Missouri and was there with Aunt Belle and Uncle Ben. He was a nice old man, kind of a heavy-set old guy. And he worked at the pumping. He pumped the water for the railroad. And I don't know how many years he'd pumped there, but most of his life he'd pumped water there. And they had a son at Lester, and Uncle Ben's niece stayed there with him and went to school, and she'd help me clean off the table of a morning. That's all I had to do is take care of that dining room, but then that was a job at itself. I think I earned my $7 a week, though it didn't bother me. I was used to working. And she'd help me clean off the table and take them in to the kitchen. And they had a man cook, Mr. Jones. And I don't think he ever did come into the dining room. His bedroom went off from the kitchen, and that was his domain. And he washed up all the pots and pans. And then those big, well, they was deeper than a regular sink. And take the dishes in there, and I'd put them in that sink and cover them over with water. Then I was supposed to sweep up the dining room and if they'd got the tablecloth dirty, why, put a clean tablecloth on there, and it was darn near every meal had to have a new tablecloth, because those were all railroad men, and they was dirty and so on, and they tracked that old soot and stuff in on my floor. And I never did like to wash windows, but there was 3 big windows. And those curtains that get so dirty and sooty, I didn't do any washing, even my own washing, just my own private little underwear and socks is all the washing I done. It was all sent to the laundry. But those big old Priscilla curtains, I'd have a job of putting them up. And the floor had to be mopped up every time all those guys come in. There wasn't so many that was there for noon. I guess they ate in Kansas City or some other place. But there was a few. The station agent and Uncle Ben and I imagine 5 or 6, I don't remember. It was there for noon. But if I kept my dining room a shining, why but after I got the dining room cleaned up, then I went in and washed all the table dishes. take them back in there while it was time to set the table for dinner. That was, but I didn't mind it really. Well, he'd every letter after he'd moved back out to the ranch, oh, this is the lonesomest place ever was. He sure wished I was there, and he just kept on that way. And then I think it must have been probably the first part of September, why he began to see if I wouldn't come home. And I told him, I said, Grandma and I won't get along because she's so jealous of us that she'd be impossible to get along with. And he said, well, if Grandma didn't get along and I didn't get along, she could either go back with Uncle Abe. He was coming that fall. She could go back with him, or we would fix up that little one-room deal over here on his homestead, and I could stay there, and I had a horse there at home, and I could have my horse and ride around wherever I wanted to go. And so, well, I didn't know about that. I was kind of leery of that arrangement. And so he finally called up, and of course he had to go to town to get gas. Well, he said he'd be in there after gas, and wanted to know if I wouldn't come home, and he'd meet me certain time, a certain place. I put him off a few days because I didn't have clothes. I hadn't bought many clothes since I'd been there. He wanted to know if I needed some money. I told him no, I had enough for my ticket. And Aunt Belle taken me to Kansas City. Of course, she rode on the pass all the time, and it wasn't far. And we went in there, and I bought well, she was the one that wanted me to buy that green suit. That just everything with her was green. And so I bought a forest green suit and a couple pretty frilly blouses and some new high-top shoes, real pointed-toed, and a perky little black hat with some cherries on it. And then some other things. I had enough for my ticket and about $7 more extra money. But while she was out here, why, this here son of hers, they just had the one child, and she thought she wanted to buy a place for him and send him out here. And this here, and she bought the Goshen place and out, just between, well, just at the foot of Rattlesnake Mountain out there and close to Ensis. They had already proved up on that, and Hugo'd come in, and him and Bill Kettle had gone into the grocery business. They started a grocery store there in town. And she bought that for him. And then he didn't know nothing about it, of course. And she told him when she got back there about what she'd done, and she was going to have him come out here and put in a crop and everything. Well, they bought a tractor and machinery to put in grain and potatoes and stuff. And the fellow, I don't know what he done. This Brenda, this niece of Uncle Ben, said he was a gambler. And that's why he wasn't there for breakfast, that he'd just eat dinner and supper there. I don't know, but he stayed there at the hotel, but I didn't see him until mealtime. And Lester, he was working on his car. And that's the first enclosed car that any of us had ever seen. He put glass around. I think it had a wooden top. But he put glass and bolted them down to the doors. When you opened the door, why, that glass came to. And when he got here with it, Pop said that was the first, that would be the thing in coming days, is to have a car all closed in. But that one was top heavy, he said. And I asked Brenda when I first got there where the son was, and said, oh, he's around somewhere with his fast crowd and spending Mom and Pop's hard-earned money. And so I guess they'd had quite a time with him. He'd gone, he was studying to be a lawyer, but that was Mama's idea. And college notified them that he hadn't been attending classes, and they started hunting for him, hired detectives, and they found him working on a section gang down in Louisiana. He'd run out of money and he wouldn't holler for the folks to send him any, so he was working on a section gang, I guess, with a bunch of niggers. But Brenda didn't like him, but I thought he was really nice, and he wanted to know all about this country, you know, and everything. And before I came home, why, him and his hired man came out, and they plowed up some land and planted some grain, and so I don't think Lester did much of it, but the hired man did.
Yeah.
But anyway, Pop and Grandpa Pat both decided there was three things the matter with that boy: that he was too darn good looking, had too much money, and too much mama. But Pop, he got quite a kick out of Lester. He, of course, with his fancy car and everything and money, why, he had his pick of all the gals here. And these guys, he'd take a notion he wanted to take one of their gals out. Why, yeah, if their boyfriends had any objections, they had to whip less. He was quite a, well, I guess he'd a trained fighter, and he could whip them all. He wasn't too big a boy, but he was really fast, and that pleased Pop. He liked Les that way, and I guess he cut quite a swath, but he was just here that 1 year, and then he went back, and then afterwards, by Ed Duncan came out and run that 1 year, and I guess they must have been pretty well fixed when they was back in Missouri, because he shipped a bunch of spotted Poland China hogs out, and big teams, and he didn't have a tractor, but he had big teams and just a lot of machinery and stuff. But things didn't work out, and well, then I came home, and Pop met me at the depot, and he had this old car that he'd fixed up. It didn't have the top because one part of the frame was broke, and that was the worst ride I ever had. He had these big overload springs on there, and oh, that was terrible. And he decided he wanted to go to Taos. And we pulled out for Taos after the train got in at 5 o'clock. And my hair was long then, and I had bone hairpins. And that Jolton, he didn't have a barrel of gas. I wished that he did have, but he just had a 5-gallon can of gas and some water and 3 or 4 tires in the back end. And dirty, dusty, oh gosh. He always did believe that the top part of the gas tank burned better than the lower part. So he brought him a 5-gallon can of gas. And but Jolton and so on, my hairpins come out, and then I didn't have any way to pin my hat to my hair. And I got cold. All I had was a suit coat. He tried to give me his suit coat, but I wouldn't take it because I knew he'd get cold too. But then through these mountains in the night, and that cold wind a-blowing, and my ear ached. Oh, when he stopped, I think he had a flat tire or something. I know he did. He had one tire mounted and then the tubes in 2 other tires. And the tires, I don't know, they must not have been too good those days. It was always a flat tire. But anyway, I got my suitcase out and taken it around in front of the headlights. Now, we didn't have a flashlight. I don't know if they made flashlights in or not. I don't remember. But I went out in front of the headlights and got in my suitcase and got a hunting something put over my ears, because I always had finicky ears. And I finally found a pillowcase that I'd been embroidering on. I pulled that hat down as far as it'd be and put my pillowcase around and put my ears. Oh, I was a pretty looking sight, I know. He sat on the running board and laughed at me a while. But that didn't help. But anyway, well, Papa got his shirt awful dirty working on tires and things, and I tried to get him to go buy another shirt, and he said no, that he didn't have that much money. He might need money before he got back. So he wouldn't get another shirt. And while he was getting some tires fixed at a filling station and filled up that evening, why, yeah, I went over to a little old store and tried to find something to go over my ears. And I finally found an old, well, it was a new scarf, but it was sure rough. But it was green and gold. And coming home, why, I tied that over my ears, and that was much better. It was dark when we got home, and Will's bedroom opened on to the porch. You couldn't go in from the house. You had to go out on the porch and in there. And he went in there, and there wasn't nobody in that bed, so we stayed there that night. And the next morning, why, Pat let us sleep quite late, and then he called us, and I think he was kind of glad to see me too, and so was Uncle Abe. But Grandma, she just kind of grunted, and she'd already ate her breakfast, and she never did say nothing against us getting married then. That was, she seemed to think it was all right, but oh God, the things was dirty. Nobody had any clean clothes, and Pat had taken some clothes down to Mrs. Ince a time or two, I think. Just enough for a change. So Uncle Abe was going to leave in a day or two, and I got his clothes cleaned, and I got him the change of everybody. And while Uncle Abe was there, just before I got there, a day or two or something, why, they was out on the porch, him and Pat. And one of the other of them says, I smell cloth a-burning. And they run into the house, and Grandma was sitting there sound asleep. And her dress was a smoldering, her corncob pipe had fell down. And it burned a hole in her dress. And one of them, I don't know, I think it must have been Uncle Abe, poured a bucket of water in her lap, and that woke her up. But she had quite a time, I guess. And Will had told me about that on our trip to Taos, and says, I guess we just can't leave her at all. And well, she's dropped her pipe a lot of times, but it's always hit on her Bible, and that plunk would wake her up. But she didn't seem to have her Bible in her hand. And she always wore an apron. I'd made her a lot of aprons. And I never did find an apron with a hole burned in it. So she must have burned it or something, on the stove. But her dress had this hole burned in it. And she never said nothing to me about it. And when I washed it, why, I hung it on the line and got it dry. And of course it was gathered around the waist, so many gathers. And I figured I knowed how to fix that. I just cut that out and let those gathers out and gathered not so much. And so while she's taking her nap, why, I got it off the line and take it to the sewing machine, and it didn't take me so long to fix it. And so when she got up, why, I was putting clothes in the basket to be ironed. And she still didn't say nothing about that dress being burned. And then when she put it on, though, next day or so, because she had dirty clothes on, and all of them had dirty clothes. But I seen her looking at that dress, and she'd look around here trying to find that hole. And I knew what she's looking for, but I never said a word because she'd never mentioned it. And I don't know if she ever did know what I'd done to it. But